Alrighty, welcome back to the next part of how to play Japan. We are still working on turn one and going over each theater mostly and what kind of options and how to kind of handle it a little bit of information. A lot of it is up to you to decide how you want to, but I just come going over and letting you know what decisions you need to make and some of the options you have available in each theater. Today we are going to cover China. Yes, China. I hate China. I hate no, I don't hate China, but in the game, China is the worst theater. I don't like it. It's so slow moving. And then, I don't know, I don't like China at all. But, so, here we are. We're in China, turn one, December 7th, 1941. This is the rough setup. Chinese troops are everywhere. I don't understand how the Japanese let this happen. I mean, they're behind their lines. It's just a free for all. Um, so China. One of the things you want to do is decide what your goals are in China, and then you take your goals and then you break them down into different phases. Phases can be something like I want to clear out all the troops, in South China, push them back behind the rail. Same thing with all the troops up here. A lot of people ignore northern China. There's not a whole lot up here, and the bases are very far and few in between them. It's kind of a real crap show up here. So pretty much most people, you have to. It's hard to say. Everyone approaches China a little bit differently. If you're going for a knockout punch, you're going to want to bring one of your paratrooper units up from for Formosa on turn one into like Hankow here, and then from there on turn two you will drop them into Ankang. Ankang's a pretty forward base into the middle of China. It starts the game with no enemy units there, unless you play some kind of a mod, but you load it up and double check. Paratroopers, one regiment of Japanese paratroopers might be able to take out a Chinese base force because they are much larger and more combative than a normal base force. So if there's any kind of actual troops in Ankang in your version, you can't paradrop in it. You won't take it. Ankang's not a major thing. I just learned about it recently myself, but it does give you a goal for like as I said, your different phases. One of the phases will definitely have to be cleaning up all the Chinese troops in your interior, as well as capturing Chusan. Wenchao's a big base you want to take, and then of course you want to come over and take Kansin and Kukong. That and then Wuchao as well. That gives you all of southern China while you're pushing these forces north and west. There's a few dot bases in here as well you'll want to take. Same thing up here. You want to push all these enemy troops out of here. Take these dot bases. Some of them will auto flip because there's no one there. Some of them will not. You definitely want to take Kuite because it's on the rail line. Until you take that, this unit of rail is pointless. One of my first missions, one of my phases I always do, I want the rail line. I want the main rail. So the main rail, I'm talking about this rail line here. I want every base on it and close to it to be owned by Japan. I want this main rail line through Wuchang. I want to take Changsha all the way out west. That's what I want. If I could take all that in China and nothing else, I'd be happy. But as the more you take, the more you want. Just normal. So you want to plan. China's a mess. Go through it, see where all your units are, and they're scattered all over. Check the garrisons, because you have to put garrisons in most of the Chinese bases to keep the rebels down. Now, some Chinese bases you don't have to. I believe this one here, nope, doesn't have a garrison. There are a few that have garrisons that you don't really need troops there, because what it is, without garrisons, every so often, the rebels will damage the base. They used to damage like resources and oil and that, and you couldn't allow that as Japan. So you had to cover them all. But then they changed that in one of the later patches. They damaged the base facilities, like they'll damage the port, the airfield. Well, if it's a small little base out of the way, like these guys here, like this base right here, it's a garrison level 40, so you need a battalion or larger, and it has nothing. There's no other than being on the road here up to this nothing base. You don't even need a garrison here. If you don't mind the little pop-ups and giving an occasional victory point to your opponent, don't waste by putting troops here. The nice thing is, between China and the Korean and Manchuria garrison, you have a lot of small units that are perfectly fit for a size 40, size 20, and so forth. So you can garrison if you want, but a lot of times you don't have to. Some of them have the garrison requirement, but you need it because look, Shanghai, you need 720 garrison level, 720 assault strength of troops. That's 2 divisions to hold Shanghai. But Shanghai gives you 120 heavy industry, 120 light industry, a repair yard, a merchant shipyard, resources, manpower. Shanghai is worth garrisoning so you can use all those. One thing you have to, when you're looking at a base, deciding whether you want to garrison it or not, you have to take a couple things into consideration. One, is there any industry, anything there that you might want? Because if you don't garrison it, you won't. I don't believe the industry works. And 2, is it on your supply lines? Is it on a rail? Is it on a road? If it is, non-garrison bases will block supply lines. So like this one here, if you don't, it has a garrison of 20. If you don't garrison it, this rail might as well not, or road might as well not even be on the map because for all purposes of it, you can't use it. It won't move supplies. It won't move oil. It won't move resources. So you have to look at that. That's way more important of a reason than, hey, it has 10 resources. 10 resources aren't that much. But being able to move an extra route on the rail, that's very important. So when you decide, when you're looking at garrison bases or not, you want to take everything into consideration. And the only way you can do that is by knowing what all the consideration is. Now, I'm not saying by far that I know all the requirements or what all the penalties are for it. I don't know. Well, I'm sure there's some players out there, especially the ones who helped design the game and worked on it. But without knowing what it does, you can't decide how to react to it, whether you care or not. So knowledge is your friend. So you want to look at it. First thing you want to do is start cleaning up all China. Move all these troops off the roads, off the rails, unless there's a reason for them to be in there. Decide where you want to concentrate your attacks. You have enough troops once you start concentrating them to attack pretty heavily in several different directions. So you can just decide, go over your troop layout, look at the enemy layout on turn 1, because that's one thing you need to realize about China. It's a large landmass. You're moving through jungles, through mountains. There is a lot of clear area, like up through here. But down in here, it's all rough and mountains and jungle, and movement is slow. So if you're off a road or off a rail, you're moving very slow if you're not up here in the clear terrain. Which is why if you look, almost every unit, in fact probably every unit, is on a rail or a road or some such a thing, because I think every unit, nope, he's on a road. Yeah, see, they're all on some sort of trail, road, or rail, because otherwise you're moving so slow. One of the first major things you want to do is take Wenchao. Wenchao has some industry on there that's nice, has some resources. There's a decent number of troops here and in the area. You want to take it and start pushing these guys north. They may come up and sit in Nanchang. If they do, move some troops out of Wuchang and the ones you have here at Kaiyukiang down here and kick them out. And you might want to track in your notes. I know I have. As you beat up these Chinese corps, then they're all corps, most of them. So if they get healed up, I call it healed up. But if they get enough supplies to get to full strength, they're almost they're like 700 assault strength. So they're a division and a half in strength. which is what the problem is with China. China back in late 44 and 45 when they're all fully grown. You just can't. You just can't stop them. But what I do is I track them by their names. You know, the 55th Chinese Corps, or whatever. And once you beat them up in one fight and they run, that core is pretty much mauled. You haven't destroyed it, but most of the combat effectiveness has dropped at least in half. Then you do it a second time, okay, that unit is combat ineffective for a month. Track that. You don't necessarily want to kill these Chinese units. You don't want to wipe them out. You don't want them to surrender. You don't want to wipe them out. The reason is, unlike every other unit in the game, that you have to pay political points to buy it back. If you can buy it back, there are units that you cannot. China regenerates its troops for free. You kill a unit, 30 days later, it reappears in Chongqing for free at 1/3 of its normal TOE. Hell, that might be stronger than it was when you killed it. If Chongqing's unavailable, I believe it goes up to Chengdu, and if that's unavailable, they sit in the queue. But that's the thing. Every time you kill one of these guys, it comes back in a month stronger than it was. Now, sometimes you can't help but killing them in normal combat. I've killed many base forces and a few small units. Base forces you don't really have to worry about because they're not really an attack force to begin with. But you don't want to kill them. I used to encircle them and kill them. Now you do get points for them. Don't get me wrong. There's no reason to kill them, but you don't kill them permanently. If you kill them, if you kill them here in the first couple months of the war, they're coming back in a month later strong, probably as strong, if not stronger, than they were when you killed them. And they get free teleport back to Chongqing, so they can go anywhere he wants. So the best thing to do is to push them out and keep pushing them along, beating them up, pushing them until you push them all. The best thing to do is push them all the way back to Chongqing and then kill them. That probably won't happen. As you push him along, he'll start running away from you as well. And if they're all beat up, you kind of want to let them run. Keep the pressure on, keep following them and pushing them if you need to, but once you've beat them up, let them run. You don't want to kill them if you can help it. All you do is want them out of your interior. Same thing with your bases. Once you start taking bases and these units are beat to hell, you don't want to finish them off. Let them run. Let them run into the interior. They're going to spend so much supply to get healed up for the units to become undisabled, let alone replacement units. You want that supply. You want that supply drain. You want these guys eating supplies to not do a whole lot of use. Keep the pressure on. Keep pushing them out of here. The first goal I always consider taking these bases is the first goal. Pushing China out of southern China is goal number 1. This area here is kind of along with goal number 1, and then goal number 2 to me is taking the rail. To me, that's very important because don't forget, resources and oil move along the rail as well. If you do enough damage and take enough territory in China, you can get the magic railway going. And if you don't know what that is, you're gonna, be very excited. Basically, what that is, that allows, once it's going and you do it correctly, you'll draw resources and oil all the way down from Singapore all the way over to Korea for free. It'll take you a week or 2 to get that going. But once it's moving, instead of hauling everything from Singapore and that over, this is all free. It can't be sunk. Which is the importance of Fusan and the southern bases here. But that as well is a whole nother video on kind of how to set that up and get it going. But this is about China, so you want to take these bases. Some of these have industry. A lot of them have resources. You need the resources to feed your industry back in Japan. You start the game 5,000 resources short a day. You have a surplus, but that only lasts you 70, 80, 90 days. By then, you need to be bringing in enough resources to support your habit. Some will come from northern Japan. The rest are coming mostly from China. And if you do it right, you don't have to ship them other than from like Korea or maybe Shanghai if you wanted to, but you won't be doing that for long. So you want all these bases. The main goal in my mind for phase like 3 is to take everything out south of the mountains. That's on the. You want this base. You want all these here. You want these and so forth. Take these, and then you could pop off Yenin. Yenin's not that useful, but it's 40 more resources. But you do have to garrison it. There's some bases up here that have some resources and industry. Langchao has some oil. Langchao, if you take Langchao and you own everything south, you should be able to get the oil out. Now, if you come all the way up in northern China, Urumqi has oil as well. I still have not found a good way to get that oil out of there. I've taken all of these, sent a couple of tank units up here, and they just plow through them. But it's almost impossible to get this oil out. I'm sure people have figured out a way. I have not. That's one thing you want to do in China. Chinese troops are even weaker than Japanese troops. Even when they get their like 43 upgrade, they're a good they're about half as strong as Japanese troops at game start, and then they get a little bit better during the game, but not that much. One-on-one, the Japanese unit is stronger than the Chinese unit of the same size. And then you bring in tanks. By that I mean you buy out every tank unit you can find over in Manchuria, and we'll cover that in another video, the whole Manchuria garrison and so forth. And they crush Chinese troops like you wouldn't believe. That is their Achilles heel. You bring those tanks over, and hey, you have 400 AV of tanks. They have 2,000 AV of troops in the open, not behind forts. Your tanks will run them over. I did some of that my last game. I still can't believe it's like, wow. They had 3-1 odds, and now you might not win the fight out until a couple days, but when you look at the losses, you'll get you'll get a bunch of disabled, 1 or 2 dead tanks, and a lot of your disabled will repair in the same turn. But you'll do thousands of losses to the Chinese. It's unbelievable how much damage tanks can do to the Chinese. Enjoy it while you can, while you're beating up on the Chinese with your tanks. Because in late 43 and 44, when the British start coming through Burma with their tanks, and the U.S. starts coming on the island hopping with their tanks, it's flipped. They start abusing the hell out of you with their tanks, and there's nothing you can do about it. So enjoy what you do to the Chinese troops, because know in the back of your head, it's coming for you at some point. But yeah, so that's the key to China. Beating up any real bottleneck of Chinese troops is tanks. Bring your tanks, mass them into 1 or 2 spearhead, and go. The rail line here on the west is very important. If you crack it, and I don't mean Nanning, that's by itself. You take like Lu Chao and Kui Lin, these fall. The only way Chang's a hole is because of all the forts that they get there and a bunch of troops. The rest, these guys, the only reason they exist and survive is because of the river. So if you roll up the western end of the rail and come up the rail, all these bases will fall. Hell, these 3 are in the open. There's no terrain bonus for them. I think Changsha might be in the open as well. A lot of bases here are all in the open. What that does, not only is it easier for your troops to defeat the enemy in the open because there's no terrain bonus, but then we're going to talk about the aircraft, your bombers, your fighters. You have a huge advantage in the air over China, especially if they don't bring the AVG in out of Burma. If they bring the AVG in, you got to be careful, because the AVG has modern planes, good pilots, and they are much better than your Nates, which is what you're going to have up in China for a long time. So the AVG can do some damage if they bring them in. So be careful of cap traps. But other than that, like all these troops, all these Chinese troops in the open, get your bombers working, bomb them. I don't care if they're Sonyas and Idas, carrying 60-pound bombs, whatever. It doesn't matter. These troops are in the open. Once they start going in move mode to get somewhere, you're gonna do massive damage to them. That's one of the keys to taking these bases. Besides, if you don't have tanks, your tank's going to be in one, maybe two spots at a time. Everything else is pure troops, supported by your bombers. If an enemy base is in clear terrain, they cannot hold it against concentrated attacks. They just can't. Not in the early war. So all these bases here, they're all in clear terrain. They will fall. It might take you, a week of attacking and a couple weeks of bombing them, but they can't hold. They just can't. You can move your tanks from base to base to base, just go one at a time and just smack them if you want to. And once you take a new base to the front, you want to build up some level 1 or level 2 fort just to help hold it, and then you build airfields, so your planes can constantly keep moving forward to the front. Because for a long time, well into 42, possibly even 43, the aircraft you're using in China are going to be your weakest models. Your Idas, your Sonyas, your Marys. If you're lucky, you'll have some Anns. Anns are a decent bomber. You'll have very few Sallies. You won't have any real long range naval bombers unless you pull them out of Formosa. Although there is a unit, I believe, sitting here. There is a unit that starts in Japan. You could put in like Nagasaki, and it can reach eastern China to help with bombing. And I believe it's restricted, so there's not much else you can do with it. But yeah, that's the key to China, is bringing in tanks, gather slow. It's not one you can do a big push towards the interior. Like if you paradrop in Kang, you can do a big tank push through this area here and go up, or even up through Cyan, with the concept that he'll collapse back towards the interior to defend it. But what do you do if he doesn't collapse? What do you do if he lets you through and then just closes the door behind you? I mean, that strategy is nice if it works. There's a lot of Chinese troops. Even a beat up Chinese base force with no assault value can block supply lines. And what do you do when you're up here in Kang and Cyan with 2,000-3,000 AV troops, and all the roads and rails behind you are cut off and you have no supply? Well, until you break that open, those troops are in deep trouble. So you got to be careful. I prefer a more concentrated push, like everywhere at once. I will concentrate on like certain areas. I like rolling up Western China here and these rail bases here with troops out of Indochina. You start with some militia groups over here. They're good for garrison. They're not much good for much else, but they're good enough to take on Chinese troops. Against British or American or Australian, no, they're pointless. But probably against the Indian troops that the Allies have, the Chinese troops, they can hold their own and they're good. You want to get in here early before he starts building forts in these. And once you get on the rail, no matter what he does, it's all over, because you're beyond the river. See the nice river here blocking that too? China has some nice terrain to help, but once you get past it, it opens a lot up. So you want to kind of sit back, pick which avenues you want to attack from, mass your troops as much as you can. In this scenario, the rail bridges are all here, so your rail lines that you start with are really nice. You want to clear, get rid of that unit there, get rid of those units there. That really opens up your rail a lot to moving troops around. You will be bringing more troops out of Manchuria into China. You will not be bringing them from Japan over. All the troops in Japan will be heading south or west, Burma, Malaysia, DEI, South Pacific, to order to boost your strength. In China, you'll be bringing troops out of Manchuria, and we will have a video next covering that whole area and how you can do that, which ones you should pick first, what you have to be cautious of, and any house rules you have to follow for that. But yeah, so the big key here, your big advantage here will be tanks and your aircraft. But watch out for the AVG cat trapping you. But that's pretty much this video. Like I said, China's a hot mess. I don't like China. Other than the resources, I don't like even taking China because it's just a real pain. It's a lot. There's a lot here, a lot of fighting, and a lot of slow moving, and your whole naval powers and stuff are pointless. Now you can move some ships up some of these rivers. You'll notice some of your bases do have ports. So your small XAKLs or AKs that you haven't converted or done something else with, you can use to move supplies up the river to the interior easier than the trails and the roads can. But not many people do that. Or you can even use barges if you wanted to. They carry, I think, 120 tons, 100 tons. So that's still, get 10 of them going and you can move a bunch of supplies over time. But there's a lot of ways you can handle China. None of them are wrong. A few maybe better than others, but China's a mess. It really is. A lot of new players kind of don't do much in China. I'd recommend clearing out the southern China at least. Clear it off your rail lines at least. That's the minimal you want to do in China. I'd also recommend taking the western rail and all these bases here. And if that's all you did in China, I mean, that's fine. You're probably hurting yourself by not pushing further in, because in 44, when the Chinese all come back at size 700 assault strength each, they will just push right through you. Now, you will have more troops by then. You'll have a chance to build forts and that, but you won't stop the Chinese juggernaut once it starts. You can slow it down for sure, but you won't be able to stop it. But that's for much later in the war. Nothing to worry about right away. So if you like this video, please go ahead and give me a like. If you're liking this series a lot and you have not subscribed already, please go ahead and subscribe so you can get notified when I put new videos out. And the next video will be covering all of Manchuria, Korea, all the Russians, what to do, and kind of what not to do. But that's the next video. Until then, we'll see you guys, and you all have a great day.